I'm Karen Wallace. I'm 72 years old, a retired nurse, and a widow for the past 10 years. I raised my son Jason on my own after my husband passed, and for a long time I believed that love, sacrifice, and good intentions were enough to hold a family together. I thought if I kept giving, they would keep loving. I thought if I stayed close, they'd always protect that bond. But what I didn't realize was that sometimes love gets quietly replaced with convenience, and loyalty can turn into something that looks like gratitude but feels hollow when no one's looking. It didn't happen all at once. There was no dramatic moment, no slammed doors, no shouting matches. Just a phone call, half forgotten, that kept running a few seconds too long. Long enough for me to hear words I can't unhear. Long enough for the truth to slip out without anyone knowing I was listening. That day, something in me shifted. Not out of rage, not yet out of heartbreak, but out of stillness. The kind of stillness that only comes when you've been living in noise for too long and suddenly realize how loud silence can be. If you've ever trusted someone so completely that you couldn't see they were using you, then you might understand where this story is going. If you've ever been the one holding up the family with your bare hands, just hoping someone would notice, then maybe you've felt this too. I didn't set out to fight anyone. I only wanted to matter. And when I found out I didn't, at least not in the way I thought I did, I made a different choice. A quiet one. But sometimes, the quiet ones carry the most weight. After Robert passed, the house felt too still. I filled that silence with small routines, the kind that give shape to a day when no one else is watching. I learned to keep busy, not because I needed to, but because staying still meant remembering what I had lost. Jason was in college when it happened. I remember the way he tried not to cry at the funeral, jaw clenched, hands stuffed deep in his pockets like he could hold everything together by force. I promised myself that day I would carry the rest of the weight for both of us, no matter how long it took. I went back to work part-time, picked up extra shifts when I could. Every dollar saved was meant for his future. When he got married a few years later, I gave him the down payment for their first condo. He didn't ask for it. I just knew. Mothers always know. Then Mason was born. That little boy lit up parts of me I didn't realize had gone dim. Holding him felt like holding life in its softest form, and suddenly, all the late nights and packed lunches made sense again. I wanted him to feel safe, always. I wanted Jason and Emily to feel like they could count on me. They made me feel wanted. Emily would bring over banana bread on Saturdays, and Jason always made a point to ask about my garden. When they invited me over for family dinners, I brought pie and stories, and it felt like something whole again. Like maybe I still belonged at the center of it all, not just the edges. Sometimes Jason would put his arm around me and call me his rock. I used to repeat that word to myself when I was alone. Rock. It sounded strong, unshakable, needed. So I helped where I could. I bought new furniture for the baby's room when they moved into a bigger house. I offered to babysit any time. I took care of the grocery bills for months when Jason said work was tight. I didn't think twice about any of it. That's what you do when you love someone. You show up, even when you're tired. They always said thank you, always smiled, always hugged me goodbye like they meant it, and I believed every bit of it. It felt real, it felt good. But love and gratitude can wear a convincing mask. And sometimes when you're holding out your hand in trust, you don't realize someone else is already measuring how much they can take. Looking back now, I see how easy it was to confuse being included with being respected, how easily warmth can be used as a tool. Back then I wasn't suspicious, I was grateful. I thought I was helping to build something that would last. I thought I was being honored. What I didn't know was that love can be rehearsed, and trust, if unchecked, can be turned into a ledger. The first time they brought it up, it didn't feel like a request. Jason and Emily had invited me over for dinner. The house smelled like garlic bread and baby lotion, and Mason was asleep in his swing, one sock off, one tiny hand curled near his cheek. Emily poured me a glass of wine, and Jason placed an envelope on the table like it was nothing serious. Just some documents about the house, he said. Nothing to worry about. He told me the loan was nearly done, but they needed a co-signer to lock in the lower rate. He smiled the way he used to when he needed money in college. That lopsided, boyish grin that made me feel like he still needed me. Emily touched my hand, told me I was family, and said it would mean so much to all of them, especially Mason. I said yes because I didn't see a reason to say no. They thanked me like I had saved their lives. Jason hugged me tight, and Emily teared up. It felt good to be that person again, the one who still had something to offer, who still mattered. I didn't ask many questions. I didn't want to ruin the moment. Later that month, they talked about renovating the nursery. Emily showed me paint swatches and Pinterest boards full of woodland creatures. Jason joked that Mason needed his own little kingdom. The bank required a quick refi, just to free up a bit of cash. My name was already on the loan, so it wouldn't change anything, they said. I didn't understand the details, but I nodded. I trusted them. I wanted to stay close to the warmth of their lives, to feel useful again. Emily brought over homemade soup that night, and Jason installed a new security system for me the next day. Each step felt like love, a favor asked, a gesture returned, a quiet exchange that kept the family rhythm going. When Jason mentioned his business idea, I was surprised. He was always creative, but now he had brochures, numbers, projections. He said the market was changing and this was the time to build something for the future. He called it a partnership, said we'd all benefit, and this wasn't just for them, it was for Mason. He used words I didn't fully understand. Equity, liquidity, short-term investment for long-term gain. He asked if he could put my name on some paperwork just to show backing. It would open more doors, he said, help them get better terms. I hesitated, just for a second. Then Jason looked at me with that same soft expression he used when he was 10 and scraped his knee. I'm not going to let you down, Mom. Those words did something to me. They reached into the part of me that still needed to be his hero. I signed. And then I signed again. A few months later, it was about the legal logistics. Jason said having power of attorney would save me from headaches if anything happened. It was just paperwork, he said, a formality. That way, he could handle the little things if I ever got sick. Emily brought over cinnamon rolls that day. She hugged me and said I was the heart of their family. I remember standing at the sink afterward, looking out at the backyard, wondering why I felt uneasy. I told myself it was just age, just nerves. Robert would have asked more questions. He always read the fine print. But I wasn't like him. I led with feeling, not suspicion. I believed in my son. I wanted to believe that love, when you give it freely, always finds its way back. Looking back, I see how each step was just close enough to normal that it didn't feel wrong. They never pushed too hard, never asked for too much all at once. Just enough to make me feel essential, without ever letting me feel concerned. That's the thing about manipulation when it's done with a smile. You don't feel the shift while it's happening. You only notice the distance after it's already taken something from you. I thought I was helping. I thought I was building something with them, but I was just being gently erased, one signature at a time. It started with laughter. Light at first, like the kind you hear through a closed window. I was sitting at the kitchen table, swirling a spoon through my chamomile tea, the candle on the windowsill flickering lavender and eucalyptus like always. I had just ended a call with Jason, nothing unusual. He'd thanked me again for the help, said they'd drop off new photos of Mason soon, asked if I needed anything from the store. I set the phone down but didn't notice the line hadn't disconnected. A pause. Then Jason's voice, relaxed and amused, came through like a crack in the sky. She has no idea. She signs everything. I leaned in before I even realized why. Emily's voice followed, high and casual. It's kind of hilarious. She really thinks this is all for Mason. Another burst of laughter, softer now, like they were trying to keep the baby asleep. My spoon clinked against the porcelain cup. I didn't move. The sound felt foreign, like someone else's life echoing in my ears. The tea cooled beside me, untouched. Jason again. She wants to feel useful, so let her. As long as she keeps signing, what does it matter? My hand hovered above the phone, unsure whether to hang up or throw it across the room. Emily laughed again, more quietly this time. We've basically got a blank check. She calls it love. I think I stopped breathing. Not out of fear, but because my body didn't know what to do with the air anymore. I stood up too quickly and steadied myself on the counter. The scent of the candle felt too sweet, too calm. My kitchen had never felt so unfamiliar. I pressed the button to end the call, though the damage had already settled deep. My body stayed still, but inside, something had cracked. The kind of crack that doesn't echo, the kind that sinks. The tea tipped slowly, dribbling across the table and down onto the rug Robert and I picked out in Vermont almost 30 years ago. I didn't rush to clean it, I just watched. It wasn't the betrayal that hit first. It was the shame, the slow, blooming awareness that everything I had clung to for warmth had been orchestrated for access. I walked to the sink and rinsed my hands. The water ran longer than it needed to. I stared out the window at the bird feeder swaying gently in the wind. A goldfinch landed, then fluttered away. My phone sat where I left it, still warm from my hand, still innocent in its appearance. I picked it up and placed it in the drawer without a word. They had laughed. That was the part I couldn't let go of. Not the manipulation, not the lies, but the laughter. As if I were a joke to them. A gullible, generous fool with too much trust and too little sense. I sat back down at the table. My fingers traced the grain of the wood, the tiny burn mark from when Mason tried to touch a birthday candle. I used to call that a memory. Now it just looked like a scar. I closed my eyes. Not to cry. I didn't cry. There was no anger in that moment either. Just an emptiness I hadn't known before. The kind that hollows you from the inside out and leaves only quiet. Then I spoke. Not to anyone in particular. Just into the room that had once held so much comfort. Not anymore. And the air around me seemed to understand. I waited until the house was dark. I didn't turn on the overhead light, just the small lamp near the window, the one Robert used to read under. Its soft glow fell across the kitchen table and onto the tablet Jason gave me last Christmas, the one I barely used. I tapped the screen, almost expecting it to push back. The apps blinked to life. The folder marked Finances was near the bottom, nestled between photos and calendar, like it didn't want to be found. The first file was a mortgage statement. It looked familiar. My name was listed as co-owner, just as they'd said. But further down, I noticed a refinance from 6 months ago. I didn't remember signing anything then. I opened the next file. Business account. My name again, listed as guarantor. The balance was large. Too large for the kind of small venture Jason had described. I scrolled through transactions. Wire transfers, international withdrawals, payments labeled with codes I didn't understand. Another folder, investment account, high risk, uninsured. My name was the primary. The words jumped out in capital letters. I felt something tighten in my chest, not from panic, but from something quieter, the slow ache of realization. Next came a cryptocurrency wallet, the kind I'd seen headlines about but never paid attention to. It was tied to an email address I didn't recognize, but the account owner was me. Or at least, my identity. Each file opened like a wound, a new angle of betrayal. Every document had been signed, some with my signature, others digitally approved from the tablet I never touched. Jason had used the power of attorney to open loans I knew nothing about. Credit cards, personal lines, all linked to my social. I was the cushion beneath every risk he took, the safety net behind every leap. The folder labeled taxes was organized, color-coded, neat. Too neat. It included years I hadn't filed a loan, forms I didn't remember, deductions I didn't authorize. Someone had been careful. I pushed the tablet aside and sat back. My eyes didn't sting. My hands didn't shake. I just breathed in slowly, and then let it out. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a structure, a system, a quiet empire built on my trust. I stood and walked into Robert's old office. The room smelled faintly of old paper and cedar. I hadn't opened his desk drawers in years. Inside, everything was still where he left it. Neatly labeled files. Ledger books. A yellow legal pad, still blank. I pulled out a pen. Started writing. Each account, each folder. Every transaction that didn't sit right. I wasn't sure what I was going to do yet, but I knew I needed the truth in front of me. On paper. In ink. I printed everything. Dozens of pages. I didn't care about the noise the printer made. Each sheet landed with a soft thud. One after another. Like bricks being laid in the foundation of something new. I made copies. Put one set on a flash drive. Saved another in an encrypted folder. Backed it all up on the old hard drive Robert and I used for family photos. Not because I was afraid, but because I was done pretending not to know. Willow, my cat, sat quietly on the counter, watching me. She didn't move, didn't meow, just looked at me like she already knew. I stacked the papers in order and clipped them together. The pile sat there, heavy but clear. This wasn't guesswork anymore. This was proof. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt something old inside me come awake. The part of me that had weathered loss. The part that raised a child on her own and balanced grocery bills down to the penny. They had used that part of me, counted on it, exploited it, but they'd also underestimated it. I sat back down, the tablet in front of me. The silence in the room wasn't empty now. It was deliberate. I wasn't the woman who nodded anymore. I was the woman who knew. I didn't call Jason. I didn't call Emily. I didn't even call Margaret, my oldest friend who usually got a full report of everything from my doctor appointments to my garden updates. Instead, I opened the drawer where Robert used to keep our important contacts. Tucked between utility bills and the warranty for our old washing machine was a business card. Monica Whitaker. Financial law. Someone Robert had trusted enough to write her name down twice. The next morning, I dressed like I was going to the bank. Slacks, a pale sweater, simple earrings. I looked like myself, and for the first time in a while, I actually felt like I recognized the woman in the mirror. I walked into her office without hesitation. Monica greeted me with a firm handshake and a stillness that made you want to sit up straighter. She didn't make small talk. She asked what brought me in, and I didn't flinch. I laid it all out, page by page, folder by folder, the accounts, the loans, the business ventures, the power of attorney. She didn't interrupt, just nodded and scribbled small notes on a yellow legal pad. When I finished, she leaned back and looked at me the way doctors look at you before delivering a diagnosis. Calm, certain, not cruel. She told me this wasn't just unethical, it was actionable. If I was ready to take steps, we could begin today. I didn't hesitate. I said start now. The next hour moved fast but clean. She drafted the revocation of power of attorney and began the paperwork to freeze all joint accounts. We submitted notices to the banks. She had a colleague pull my credit report in real time. I saw debts I didn't know I had. She updated my will and stripped Jason and Emily from any future claim. I would leave Mason a trust instead, handled through a professional. I didn't want my love for him to ever be used as leverage again. Monica glanced up at one point and said I might face backlash. Emotional manipulation, guilt, even threats. I told her I'd been preparing for that my whole life without realizing it. She gave a small nod that felt like a quiet kind of respect. I signed each document with a pen she handed me. It was heavy in the hand, smooth across the paper. My name looked different now. It didn't feel like a gift. It felt like a statement. By the time I left, the sun had moved just far enough west that the office windows lit up with a gold that made the dust in the air sparkle. It looked like clarity. I took a breath outside and didn't rush to my car. Back home, I tucked the folder of legal copies into the small safe where Robert's old will still sat. Next to it, I placed the flash drive. Then I closed the door and turned the lock. Not out of fear, but out of resolve. The next few days passed with a kind of stillness I hadn't known in years. No calls, no texts. I didn't reach out. I didn't chase answers. I watered the plants. I made soup. I opened the windows and let the late spring breeze wander through the house. I wasn't angry. I wasn't vindictive. I was simply done pretending that kindness and silence were the same thing. At night, I sat with a cup of tea, and my cat curled at my feet. I read through the financial binder Monica had helped me organize. For the first time in a long time, I understood everything I was looking at. There was something healing in that, something quiet and sharp. I didn't need permission to reclaim what was mine. I only needed the decision. They had counted on me to stay silent. They had counted on me to stay grateful. But I wasn't either of those things anymore. I was awake. I was clear. And I was not giving away one more piece of myself just to be called family. Jason thought we were meeting to talk about another investment. That's how I framed it when I called. Something casual. Just the three of us. I knew if I said more, they'd come with prepared faces and sharper lies. They arrived 5 minutes early. Emily carried a box of pastries like everything was fine. Jason gave me a quick hug, asked if I'd been resting enough. I smiled and led them into the living room, where Monica was already seated with her briefcase at her side. Jason stopped mid-step. His smile flickered, then tightened. Emily's eyes darted to Monica, then to me. I gestured toward the couch like it was any other afternoon. They didn't sit. Jason asked who she was. I told him she was my attorney. Her presence was for something long overdue. Emily shifted the box of pastries from one hand to the other, her fingers twitching at the edge. Jason started speaking fast. Said this felt sudden. Said he didn't understand what was happening. I stayed seated and folded my hands over my lap. I told him I knew everything. The accounts, the loans, the power of attorney, the business under my name. Emily's voice broke as she tried to speak. She said they did it all for Mason. That none of it was meant to hurt me. That family sometimes makes messy choices. I looked at her and said family also tells the truth. And they hadn't done that in a long time. Jason's face turned red. He said I was overreacting, that I was being manipulated by a lawyer who didn't know us, that I was ruining everything we'd built together. I told him I wasn't ruining anything. I was reclaiming what was mine. What they had quietly taken and dressed up as partnership. Monica opened her briefcase and slid a folder across the table. Inside were copies of every document Jason had signed under my name. Every transfer, every application, every signature traced back to the moment I stopped asking questions. Emily said I was turning my back on my son. I said no. He had turned his back on me the moment he stopped seeing me as a person and started treating me like a bank. Jason's voice cracked. He said I'd regret this, that cutting off my own family would leave me alone. I stood up and looked him in the eyes. I told him I'd rather be alone in truth than surrounded by people who only show up when they need something. He didn't have a response. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came. Emily reached for his hand, but he pulled away. Monica stayed silent. Her presence said enough. I walked them to the door. My steps were steady. My voice never wavered. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply said this conversation was over. And going forward, all contact would be handled through legal channels. Jason said one last thing, something about how I used to be kind. I told him kindness without boundaries isn't love. It's submission. And I wasn't interested in playing that role anymore. The door clicked shut behind them. The silence that followed wasn't heavy. It was clean, like air that had finally been cleared. Monica gathered her papers and looked at me with something like respect. She said most people don't fight back until it's too late. I told her it almost was. But I was still here, still standing. And that would have to be enough. For the first time in years, I wasn't clinging to hope. I was holding truth, and it didn't tremble in my hands. The days after that final conversation passed quietly. No more calls, no more messages, no more unexpected favors wrapped in warmth. I gave myself time to think, not about what was lost, but about what was left. My name was clean again. My accounts were mine. But more than that, I had taken back something I hadn't even realized I'd given away. I started going to the library on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Nothing big. Just shelving books and chatting with people who came in looking for something small to feel better about their day. It felt good to show up for something without being asked to fix, fund, or explain. At first, I still waited for the ache to return. That quiet tug in my chest that used to come when I felt forgotten or used. But it didn't come. I kept breathing and moving and doing things just for myself. I planted a row of lavender by the kitchen window. I walked down to the post office instead of driving. I wrote lists not because I had to remember, but because I wanted to stay present. I liked that I didn't have to rush anymore. One morning, I found a letter in the mail from Emily. I didn't open it. I placed it in a drawer with a paperweight on top. There was a time I would have read every word looking for a hint of love beneath the excuses. That time had passed. I still think about Mason. He's too young to understand what happened. Maybe someday he'll ask. And when he does, I'll be ready to tell him the truth without bitterness, just facts, not to punish. Just to make sure he learns what love should never cost. My house feels different now, lighter, like it finally belongs to me again. I make tea in the evenings and sit by the window as the sun folds down behind the trees. The candle Emily once gave me has long since burned out. I replaced it with one I picked out for myself, citrus and cedar, clean and simple. Willow curls at my feet while I read, her breathing slow and steady. Sometimes she lifts her head just to make sure I'm still there. I don't fill every silence. I don't chase noise to prove I still matter. I matter because I said so, because I showed up for myself when no one else would. I don't feel angry anymore. I feel whole, not because someone returned what they took, but because I stopped handing it over. Now, when I sit in my kitchen with the evening light stretching across the table, I don't feel fear in the quiet, I feel peace. And that's what I took back. If you've ever been used by someone you love, I want you to know something. You're not naive, you're not weak, and you're certainly not alone. Most of us were taught that love means sacrifice, that to give without question is the mark of a good parent, a loyal partner, a strong friend. But no one warned us that some people will see that love not as something sacred, but as something convenient. For a long time, I thought being generous meant being good. I thought saying yes meant staying close. I thought holding the family together was more important than holding on to myself. But what I've learned is this. When you give everything without limits, people stop seeing you. They start seeing what you provide. And little by little, your name becomes a transaction instead of a person. It's not easy to choose yourself when you've been told your whole life that your worth lives in what you do for others. It feels unnatural, it feels selfish, but I'm here to tell you it's neither. It's survival, it's clarity, and most of all, it's freedom. Choosing myself didn't mean turning my back on love. It meant drawing a line between love and control. It meant realizing that being needed is not the same as being respected. If you're listening to this and it feels familiar, I hope you hear what I couldn't hear for far too long. You don't have to earn your place by shrinking. You don't have to prove your love by giving until there's nothing left for you. Start with one decision. Just one. Say no where you used to say yes. Ask a question where you used to nod. And when the guilt tries to claw its way in, remind yourself that boundaries are not betrayal. They are protection. They are peace. They are power. If this story made you feel seen, I hope you'll share it. Leave a comment if you've ever had to reclaim your voice from someone who thought you'd never speak. And most of all, carry this with you. Kindness is beautiful, but it is not the same as surrender. Keep your heart soft, but your spine strong. You deserve that much. We all do.